Hello to all fellow Pop-O-Holics. It's Christian here. This episode is brought to you by me, my band Midnight Satire. Midnight Satire's newest single, AR, is now streaming. The Alternative writes, AR is an interesting blend of organic and electronic. Postal Service-esque synths with a build-up that any emo fan would enjoy. It's a dream pop for a night drive, full of texture and drama. Those aren't my words. That B's a real music writer right there. I'd also like to announce Midnight Satire is partnering with the Youth Mental Health Project. They help equip communities with the tools to facilitate an open, honest dialogue about youth mental health so that parents and children get the help and resources they need. This is a wonderful, wonderful cause. You can donate today by searching for Midnight Satire on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, following the link tree to the Youth Mental Health Project sponsorship page, and submitting a donation there. I encourage you to read up about it. It's a really great cause, and it's something I'm very passionate about. All right, let's get into the show. Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, a show about hot takes, hotter than pancakes. We're a couple of time travelers. This is traveling through time. If this is your first time listening to the show, we take every week to talk about our theme for the month. This month's theme is time travel, and we've talked about some interesting stuff with time travel. Check out the last couple episodes. They've been real great. And this week we are talking about Back to the Future. But I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't have my special guest that I have all the time. They're always special, even though they're regular guests. I still think they're pretty special. It is
Chris Conkling.
And Brian Dupree.
Thanks for coming along, guys. What we do is we talk about what we've been consuming for the week. We have a weekly poll we put on Facebook, and then we get into the main topic today, which, again, is Back to the Future. But let's start off, like we always do, with what we've been consuming in our quick hit section. Chris, let's start with you. What have you been consuming lately?
So I've been doing a lot of work this week, so I haven't really had a whole lot of time to watch stuff or read stuff, but I have been listening to stuff. I started listening to Baby Don't Hurt Me, Stories and Scars from Saturday Night Live by Chris Kattan. This is Chris Kattan's basically memoir talking about his time on SNL, a little bit of his youth, the time that he spent at the Groundlings before he got picked up for SNL and working with all these amazing, talented comedians from the late 80s and 90s. I don't know if you guys know this, but I am a Saturday Night Live nut. I think I've mentioned it before here on the show. And it's the information you get about behind the scenes on Saturday Night Live is kind of few and far between. So whenever you get one of these memoirs that comes out from a Saturday Night Live alum, I eat it up. And this is just another one of those. Chris Kattan was one of my favorites growing up. I don't know how familiar you guys are with him.
So good.
But he talks a lot about the conception of Mr. Peepers, which is a hilarious character, about just a lot of the characters that he made famous on SNL. And it's been a really fun and informative listen. I definitely recommend it if you're a comedy or Saturday Night Live fanatic.
I will definitely have to check this out because I was never huge into Saturday Night Live, like consistently watching every week, but it must have been in middle school at some point. I caught a random episode, and it's a sketch of Chris Kattan bringing a woman home from the bar and playing songs that he's covered by himself, and it's one of the most hilarious sketches of my life, so I definitely got to dig into this.
Yeah,
he's a very funny guy.
Yeah, I'm not sure Chris Kattan has ever been my favorite person that's been on Saturday Night Live. He's pretty hit or miss, but I don't know why, but he has an absurd character called Mango, and Mango
yeah.
is just a creepy, weird, like feral child or something. You know, it's a very out there, obnoxiously ridiculous character that I enjoy. But yeah, I think whenever you dig into Saturday Night Live's history, I mean, I think everybody has their own era of what their favorite cast members have been. I know that I've kind of ebbed and flowed through a couple of different ones. The highlight of that early 90s where you get Kattan and Farrell and all those greats, Molly Shannon just killing it. There's a lot of Chris Farley and Adam Sandler, late 80s, early 90s stuff. And then kind of picks back up for me once you get the Lonely Island crew. They kind of injected new life into that series. And it's just, it's such a historic thing. It's like the longest running sketch comedy in existence. It would take someone starting now and going for the next 50 years. I believe they celebrated their like 45th anniversary, right? Aren't they on like 50 years now?
This coming season will be their 45th.
Yeah.
Paul Rudd just wrapped up their 44th season last weekend.
Yeah, and obviously so many talented comedians, and they've kind of, like I said with The Lonely Island, kind of adapted to new technologies and YouTube and all that stuff, and they're still going strong, where a lot of long-running things have faded. What Lorne Michaels has been able to do over the years and keeping fresh cast in and rotating out. And people have, what their opinions, but it's one of those things where I think it's proven that it always reminds me, and I always tell myself this, is like when you're making art or making work, you just have to be prolific. Like you can't stop making it, even though it may not all be good. SNL is like that idea in a nutshell, where like they'll push sketches out to the point of we just need to fill 2 hours. And sometimes you get these magical moments of like, we don't have any, like this was the 5th idea that we had, and it's just been lying on the ground and, trying all that stuff. And it doesn't always work. And SNL is known for its back half being really bloated, but it is this idea of just like pushing forward. So to get some insight into that is really interesting. And even though I don't love Chris Kattan, I still think it would be really interesting to look back. I've heard Farrell and, other Seth Meyers and all these other people from SNL kind of speak on the subject, but to have an organized book would be really interesting, especially from that time.
Really interesting thoughts on Will Ferrell from Chris Kattan, because they were very good friends at the Groundlings before they both got picked up for SNL. Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry actually got picked up first. But like the way in which Chris Kattan talks about Will Ferrell, it sounds like he was Lorne Michaels' golden child. Like, yeah, he could do no wrong when he was on the show, and they cast him in as many sketches as they possibly could while he was a member. Which
I think it paid off.
Yeah,
it paid off. I think it was a good investment. Cool. So that's Baby Don't Hurt Me, Stories and Scars from Saturday Night Live by Chris Kattan, which is available on Audible and wherever books are sold. Brian, you've been doing a bit of reading. Tell us about it.
I have. So the first one that I read was Fortune and Glory, a true Hollywood comic book story by Brian Michael Bendis. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. Chris has given me the power fist there.
I think that's the conductor train lever is what you did.
Oh, okay.
Or the pull the horn truck driver.
Christian, you're slacking on the sound effects. But
I don't know. Don't remind me that I have access to stupid soundboard.
Let's cut that where it starts. So this is a story. It's written and drawn by Brian Michael Bendis, who has, since the time of this, become one of the biggest names in comics. I know he does a lot of the Marvel stuff nowadays. I'm not sure if he did any DC stuff back in the day, Chris.
He's working for DC right now.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he switched over to DC, with comics I lose track of time, but I think it was like 2 years ago.
Okay, cool. So Brian Michael Bendis, this is a story about him when he was first coming up in comics. One of his first graphic novels was called Goldfish, and it started getting some option opportunities in Hollywood to be made into a film, and it basically documents the time from when he wrote this to when he got when he had the idea to do the screenplay and being paid to write the screenplay and going to LA and meeting the producers. And it's this ridiculously funny take and a true take on what it means to be a writer in Hollywood and how lucky he was to have a stable job outside of that. It's basically this really funny tale of him going to Hollywood and trying to get his first and eventually second graphic novel produced for the screen, and ultimately failing, but it gave him really interesting insight into Hollywood and how they view comic books. And considering where the comic book industry is today in Hollywood, it feels very revolutionary for the time that he was breaking in this early in the 90s. So yeah, highly recommend this book. I got it for $1 at my local comic shop. It was on sale. It's like a $15 book.
What?
Yeah, ridiculous. So yeah, that's Fortune and Glory, and that's a graphic novel by Brian Michael Bendis.
Very cool. Chris gives it a big.
There it is. Now
that sounded like
point.
Someone was playing in traffic. I don't know if.
Okay.
There we go.
Chris is that's gonna be our sound for the Chris approved sound.
So the much anticipated other thing that I read today.
I'm ready. I'm so ready for this.
And I had told you guys something in our group text that was a little bit off. I actually got this at Sound Exchange when I bought Back to the Future. So it was perfectly synchronistic. I got the trilogy of Back to the Future for $8. It was a DVD from 2015, but the quality is pretty solid, at least for the first one. And it's like twice the cost of renting it. So I was like, screw it. But I'm digging through their independent comics section and find a book called Time Beavers from 1985, written by.
You might want to quickly describe what type of beavers you're talking about, Brian.
These are actual beavers, like little furry animals who, in this world, walk upright like humans. And
so Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but beavers.
Exactly,
That's
but
awesome.
They're also time traveling. So essentially, these beavers protect a wall that essentially protects the universe's time. So they're kind of like the protectors on the wall of the universe. And
it sounds like a lot like Game of Thrones.
I haven't watched Game of Thrones fully, but it definitely was making me think of that with the way they were the guards of the wall. Mm-hmm. And long story short, it's a very short book, probably 30 or 40 pages total. And it's broken into 5 or 6 page portions. But the bad guys in this are shape-shifting rats who are trying to go back in time and change Earth's past. So there may be, and I haven't dug into this to see what the political commentary on it is, but could be some questionable anti-Semitic tropes that are playing around with here. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there so I don't get roasted on the internet if people are like, oh, you're reading that freaking white nationalist garbage.
Time Beavers. The
Time
manifesto
Beavers.
for the alt-right.
Yeah.
But so these
supremacist propaganda.
But these rats go back in time to try and change Earth's history with these powerful objects. So one of the objects that they're going to use is the gun that killed Abraham Lincoln, and they're trying to kill him during the Gettysburg Address before he's inevitably killed at the Ford Theater. And so they have to go back and try and stop that. And they also try and give Hitler an atomic bomb at the end of the war. It's kind of out there, but kind of similar to Endgame in that you have our main characters going back in time to retrieve stolen artifacts that will inevitably save the universe. So that's Time Beavers by Timothy Truman.
What is the reason the Beavers are trying to get a nuclear bomb to Adolf Hitler?
Well, the rats are trying to get the bomb to him to change the course of World War II.
The Beavers are the good guys.
The Beavers
rats
are the good guys.
That's why I was
here.
confused.
Yeah.
It was like, well, yeah, that is pretty anti-Semitic if the main characters are trying to. I was like, I don't think there's a question about it.
Right. I may have misspoke and said the Beavers, but yeah, it's kind of got this, and maybe all comics back then were, but it's got this retro, very bold color style. And yeah, it was a fun little read. Not something I would say you got to read this book, but to wrap up our time travel month, I thought it was perfectly appropriate.
Absolutely. Do you know what year was published?
1985.
85. Okay.
Do you think that Time Beavers has any chance of being optioned with Rocket Raccoon being so successful? Getting Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
From what I know from Fortune and Glory, it seems like everything is optioned, and 99% of those just never turn into anything. So it probably was optioned.
Universal
at some point.
has had Time Beavers locked in a vault for the last 20 years.
I believe Late Night Cinemax has had a version of Time Beavers in the works.
Different story. Don't Google that one, listeners.
All right, so what have I been watching? Well, I've been making a lot of bad decisions in life, and we'll get into that the Back to the Future conversation a little bit. But let's just say I haven't had a lot of free time, and with the free time, I've not been spending it productively. I've either been trying to binge drink or recording my own stuff, which is more productive. More on that next episode, hopefully. And I've also been playing a lot of World of Warcraft, so it's tricky to squeeze in the important stuff. But
I forgot about World of Warcraft last week.
Oh man, oh boy, I'm not even gonna touch that one right now. It's a problem. You don't quit World of Warcraft; you just take long breaks. It's like smoking cigarettes. Anyway. So in the little time that I've had, I was able to watch Raising Kratos, which is a free-to-watch documentary on YouTube, and it's about the making of God of War, and primarily focuses on Cory Burlog and his staff, his close staff around him.
that supported him in making this game. And I would say if you really love God of War, definitely worth a watch. I wish there was more types of this documentary. It was produced by Sony, but I still think it still shows behind the curtain of game design and how stressful it can be. I think the documentary is 50% effective. The back half is really powerful. I mean, there is some really intense stuff that happens with the production and the drama thereof, but the first half seems more like a commercial for the game Sony Studios, right? But it's so hard because there's so much IP that's involved and so much kind of like technical trade secrets almost with making games. Like they don't, this is a very competitive industry. They've got a lot of talent, and it's less like Hollywood where people know how everything's made. It's more of like, hey, we know these ways to produce these games that are cutting edge, and we don't want to share it with our competitors, right? And there's a lot of stuff like that, a lot of political stuff with the companies. So it's interesting that we got this. Again, if you're a huge fan of God of War, you really want to know the Cory Burlock story with how they came to reinvent the series, and you want to peek behind the curtain, worth a watch. It's just a little long. And but there is a moment when you kind of get an idea for kind of the highlights of this movie are you're really following the composer and, him making the music. You're following some of the animators and Cory himself. And when they accomplished the demo, which 2 years before it was supposed to be released, they did a live demo, which was pretty much everything they had worked on. And there's a moment when Kratos appears and the crowd loses it, and the composer's got his hands in the air as they're swelling the music, and he just like kind of breaks and starts like smiling about how excited everybody is. And all the animators are like look, all the people that are working on the game are looking around at everybody getting so excited, and there's this like moment of like,
that's awesome, pure
victory of like, oh my god, people are digging what we've done and what we've put so much work into. That was really inspiring. That was kind of worth the watch for me.
And this is about the new PlayStation 4 God of War.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Not
This is God of War. Yep. And they talk about kind of where everybody was when they made the first ones and how they were really forced to reinvent it. And no surprise, Cory Burlock had a kid, and that inspired a lot of what God of War is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's free. So if you want to check it out on the YouTubes, that is Raising Kratos by Sony Studios. And then I've also been watching, Game of Thrones is over, but don't cancel your HBO subscriptions yet. I think something that's probably not arguably, just kind of demonstrably better than the last season of Game of Thrones is the miniseries Chernobyl. And I would say this thing is an A-plus miniseries. Really love what they're doing. It is the most intense thing I've seen since, I'm rewatching Breaking Bad right now, and I'd say Breaking Bad kind of holds the candle for longest sustained intensity in a show. But this, right out the gate, and for the 3 episodes I've watched, the 4th one just premiered tonight, or this would be 2 days ago if you're listening on Wednesday. And it's super exciting. The only thing that throws me off is that it takes place in Chernobyl in the Ukraine, in Soviet Russia, and everybody's British. And I feel like we've been treated by people like Tarantino that do authentic. Tarantino is never afraid to be like, this person's German, he's going to speak German. And if he switches to English, there's going to be a narrative reason that they start speaking in English. And everybody has, of course, because it's based on real events, has Russian names. They say comrade a lot, but they're all super British. And so in this day and age, that throws me off a little bit and takes me a little out of the experience. But other than that, the performances are absolutely excellent. Stella Mr. Skateboard Skarsgård gives an excellent performance in this, and there's also a lot of great supporting cast that I don't have pulled up, so I can't credit them, but they're all British actors. They're doing phenomenal work, and it is very intense, and it's got me really interested in learning about Chernobyl. I'm trying to hold off until I watch this narrative interpretation of it, but really excited to dive in to see what happened there. It's essentially just a state government not wanting to reveal that they've royally screwed the pooch and completely caused a natural disaster, a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, and it takes you into the mind of a communist nation trying to deal with it. So it's very, very interesting. You guys interested in checking this out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been seeing advertisements for it all the whole season of Game of Thrones. So I've been meaning to start watching it. I had no idea that it actually started. So as soon as I get the opportunity, I'm definitely going to jump in.
Yeah, same. A good friend of mine actually just recommended it to me a few hours ago. He started watching it this weekend, so I've heard great things.
It's cool, and I love the mini series format. HBO's put out, I'm forgetting the one with Oscar Isaacs, But I think it's called like Small Town Hero or something like that. And it's about a guy running for office in New York for like a mayor or city council or whatever. And it's a really short and sweet. I wouldn't say it's mind blowing, but I really do love miniseries because it has a definitive end. And when you try to do something that's as epic as 5 to 10 seasons, it can be tricky figuring out where to end it. Oftentimes shows run too long. So the fact that when they start out, they're like, this is a one series run, I'm always way more down, and my expectations are way more level, and you can just enjoy it for what it is. So that's Chernobyl, and it's available on HBO now. And they'll have, by the time listening to this, they'll have 4 episodes up. And I watched all 3 in a row with my girlfriend, and it was very intense, but it was excellent. It was a good watch.
Please don't leave your thoughts on hold. Come on down to a weekly poll. Please don't leave your thoughts at home. Come on down to a weekly poll.
How's it going, guys? It's time to talk about our weekly poll. In regards to the movie that we watched last week, About Time, last week's poll, we asked you guys if you could travel back in time and change anything from your past, knowing that it might have unforeseen consequences on your present, would you? And yeah, we went a little more philosophical last week than we typically do. But as always, thank you so much for everyone who participated. And it turns out that 55% of you would indeed go back in time and change things about your past.
And it turns out 95% of you would not tell us what that would be.
Yeah, So whoever's hurt you, I'm sorry for them doing that. How do you guys feel about these results? When I didn't mean to trick our listeners, but you're kind of implying, if you say yes, I would like to go back in time to change something, that something unpleasant may have happened, or you're unhappy with your current present, which kind of sucks. How do you guys feel about this?
This didn't really level what the severity of it was, and that's why we asked people to comment.
True.
So in the future, leave us those comments. Let us know, because it could be as simple as like, yesterday I had Burger King and it sucked.
Yeah, I really want to go back and not have Burger King, but instead Chick-fil-A, because God,
Right.
Burger King was awful.
If I could have gone back in time yesterday, I would have gone back and not had 10 sangrias at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, I just wouldn't have done that. It did not turn out well. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I wish we had gotten a little more feedback on this, because it is quite a philosophical thing. Personally, I voted no. I'm always trying to come to terms with what's happened in my life and not live in the past, but I could definitely understand the desire to want to change things, especially
Definitely.
with that's
Do you
how
guys
life
have
is,
any?
though.
So you're saying no, Brian. Chris, how did you vote on this?
I said no as well, because like Brian, I too am like just trying to reflect on the things that have happened in my life and basically accept that they are part of the person I am today.
Yeah, I do that too. But I also think back to, the biggest decision. I might have told you guys this at one point. I always wanted to be a director when I was younger. I was part of that early YouTube generation. As it turns out, I probably just should have kept making YouTube videos. It probably would have turned out just fine. But anyway, I wanted to be a big Hollywood director. That was like my dream and my passion as a young man. And I had the opportunity to go work on the second Transformers movie as a production assistant. I had a connection with, knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. And they were like, yeah, we'll give you a job. Come out. We'll help you find housing. And I just wanted to fulfill the classic go to college thing. And I look back and I think, well, my life would have been entirely different. I don't think it was the answer to my success. I think I was a very immature young man. And I made a lot of mistakes even in college. And I think the consequences of doing that maybe on the other side of the world or the other side of the country might have been more severe. And, that could have been very, very bad. Or it could have been good. I don't know. But I always look back and go, man, that was that Robert Frost fork in the road that I had to choose. And I think, out of all the decisions I've ever made in my life, that one would have the most impact. And so I've always been interested to see what the reality of that would be. I might have moved back after like 6 months. And I think to myself, I probably would have done like that is the most likely reaction, but you never know. Maybe
There's a parallel universe out there, man, where Christian Katie went to the West Coast and helped make
the worst movie.
Yeah, the worst Transformers movie that's ever come out, Revenge of the Fallen. But that movie made a lot of money regardless of its quality.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, like, if Michael Bay met me, I probably would have got a mouthful. Like, I imagine Michael Bay would have fired me
Or
I'd have been like, Mr. Bay, that's all that it would have taken to end my career. Mr. Bay, did you want to wait until the writer's strike is over so that we could actually have some, I don't know, dialogue in this picture? And he's like, you're supposed to get me fucking coffee. You're fired. Go home.
that could have happened. Or maybe he was so delighted by your chutzpah that he fired Shia LaBeouf and then made you the lead of the third Transformers movie.
And then I would slowly go insane and be struggling to find my own person in art. But hey, that's what I'm doing now. You know what? It would have made a damn difference, as it turns out.
It's all the same.
Both roads lead to the same result. But if you guys had, I mean, is there anything off the top of your head that if you minor or major, that if you were forced to, gun to your head, you had to change something, what would you do?
I only have one regret in my entire life, and that is a couple years ago, I came home after work, and my wife had brought home the cutest dog I've ever seen in my entire life. No joke. And because she was working 60 hours a week, I was working 40 hours a week, I just didn't think there was any conceivable way we could take care of this dog at that point in time. So I made her take the dog back.
So you strangled the dog.
And
My one regret is killing the cutest dog I've ever seen. No, I made her take it back to the shelter. And that dog has come up in conversation many times over the course of the last 4 years. And we still have pictures of that dog. And my friends judge me sometimes because I gave up the cutest dog and probably easiest to take care of dog in the entire world. He was a little Chiweenie. So he was like a Chihuahua Dachshund mix.
As an owner of a mixed Chihuahua dog, I would say that you made the greatest decision in your life. You made a wonderful decision. Yappers, they are.
No, is Riot part Dachshund?
Is part Chihuahua. He's a Min Pin Chihuahua, and
Gotcha.
he is loud. He's very opinionated.
This dog was very tiny and adorable, and it wasn't going to get much bigger than it already was. Mm-hmm. So I think a couple of our older coworkers actually owned Chihuahua Dachshund mixes before. And they said they're actually pretty good dogs. So my one regret in life is forcing my wife to bring that dog back. If I could go back in time, maybe I'd change it, but then who knows where we would be now. So what about you, Brian?
This is a tough one. I don't know if I want to say exactly publicly, but...
Understandable.
Whether it be definitely relationship stuff, whether it be my parents or former girlfriends, definitely stuff there that I look back on with much regret. So there would definitely be stuff, but, just always trying to get better.
No, I think all of us can align with that. I think us as men, especially in this era of accountability, definitely look back and say, like, hey, I haven't 100% behaved appropriately. But I think growing up is understanding that, apologizing when it's appropriate, and moving forward, and not doing that to people, anymore, and being better about relationships.
Yep,
for sure.
True growth is being able to learn from your mistakes. So take responsibility.
Yeah, there's not enough time travel power in the world for me to fix all the terrible things I've done to people. So I'm going to make a public apology right now. If you are listening to this and I have mistreated you, I'm sorry. I feel like a terrible person.
Issues resolved.
Yeah, done.
Huge weight lifted from your shoulders.
You solved it. Wow.
Everyone you've ever wronged listens to our podcast.
Because they're still obsessed with me because I'm so awesome.
I envision your public...
And now it's all retracted. All for naught.
Is the growth stopped?
Christian, I envision your public apology to be like akin to the final episode of Seinfeld. Where
That's exactly what I was thinking, Chris. That's so funny.
Every person you've ever wronged just kind of like shows up in a court of law to convict you. And then you're sent off to jail for like unknown reasons. For like jaywalking. Weren't they arrested for jaywalking? Isn't that what happened in the last Seinfeld episode? Anyway, that's not
something like that.
there.
Yeah,
I just remember it was a two-parter. I do not remember that clear though, but I do remember it was a cliffhanger, two-parter.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can vote for our weekly poll and feel free to leave a comment or anything on our Facebook. You can also leave us a 5-star review if you're enjoying the show, or if you want to publicly shame me for something I've wronged you for and want to put it in there. Just as long as it's a 5-star review, we'll read it aloud on the episode. So that's on Apple Podcast if you go there. But we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to dive into, we are going back to the future, which is actually the past, and then that's when you go back to the future. But what is really the future? But we're going to get into all of it. Suit up, Marty. Great Scott, and whatnot.
That's heavy, man.
Welcome back to Pop-O-Holics. How much radio voice can I add to this? Welcome back to Pop-O-Holics. Show about hot takes, hot and pancakes, couple time travelers traveling through time. We're talking Back to the Future, 1985, classic. People love this film. People love it. We're going to talk about the history, our history with this movie, and how we felt about it, how we feel about it today. We're going to talk about Alan Silvestri's score and how the music builds tension, arguably probably the best part about this movie. We're going to talk about the production challenges, which I'm interested to get into because I think Chris is going to lay down a lot of facts there. And out of all we're going to kind of do this in a retrospective of all these films, kind of what handles time travel the best and what do we prefer.
Steven Spielberg presents Back to the Future, a Robert Zemeckis film. Marty leads an ordinary life.
No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley.
Well, history is going to change.
And 1985 is not his year. But Dr. Brown is about to change all that.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? What of a DeLorean?
He's sending Marty 30 years back in time.
It's a flying saucer from outer space!
Now, he's trapped in the past.
It's got to be a dream.
About to meet
Chocolate.
Back to the Future is 1985, directed by Robert Zemeckis, had a $19 million budget and grossed almost $400 million. That is what we call a success in the business. It stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Crispin Glover, and Thomas F. Wilson. So, guys, what's our history with this movie? Brian, I'm going to throw it to you to start things off.
So this is a movie that I definitely saw probably 8 to 10 years old and had seen multiple times throughout my childhood. I hadn't rewatched it in probably 15 years at least. And coming back to this, honestly, and we'll talk about the score later, but the music just immediately brought me back to childhood. And it felt like, I know we've talked a lot about it before, but and now I'm blanking on his name. The guy who does all of the amazing soundtracks.
John Williams?
John Williams. I thought this was John Williams when I was hearing it. It definitely reminded me of that same sort of just, it brings you to this place that is unforgettable every time you come back to it. This movie is just so much fun. I feel like it's eminently fun. It's fast-paced. It's funny. A little bit awkward at times. And coming back to it now, I realize some of the content was way over my head, and the way they did it worked really well, where you can watch it as a kid and not be freaked out and really hit over the head with what's actually happening. And then watching it as an adult, it really is a whole different situation, seeing what he sees when he goes back and sees his parents' world of the 50s. So I loved this movie. I got the trilogy, and I plan to watch the other two, so I'm going to give you guys a breakdown next week, because I know listeners, vote in our poll, because we have the sequels, 2 or 3. Definitely tell us what you think is best, and I'll let you know and vote accordingly. But I really enjoyed this movie, and it was a pleasure coming back to it, really.
So I'm gonna spoil my opinion of this movie right at the top of this, guys. Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies of all time. I first saw this movie when I was probably in 1st or 2nd grade. So I was very young, very impressionable, and I watched it at my friend's house, and his family owned a Volkswagen hatchback, which was like a silver Volkswagen hatchback. And it looked similar to a DeLorean, but like a little bit longer. And I just remember he and I, as little kids, like desperately wanting to turn that Volkswagen into a time machine. Like, we were obsessed with this movie, and it's just stuck with me my entire life. I personally think this film is perfect. Like score, like screenplay, acting, like what it took for this movie to come together. This is a almost perfect film in my opinion.
And today, guys, we're going to talk about the subjectivity of art. And yes, there's no such thing as a consolidated opinion. It's hard for me to look back and organize my thoughts about how I feel about this movie. I just always thought it was extremely overrated for a movie, and I think it depends on when you saw it and the time. And I'm sure if I was a cinephile and saw this in the 80s as like a teenager or a college kid, I guarantee you my opinions would be different. I think it's very time and place oriented. And I want to say that I'm pretty sure in my memory, I have to rewatch Back to the Future 2, I'm pretty sure I actually like the second part of this trilogy more than the first. I remember that connecting with me more as a kid. But I have not seen the films that much because I always was very uncomfortable about the content in this movie. I would say that upon rewatch, which, I'm not giving Back to the Future the benefit of the doubt. As I was talking about off air, I had pushed off watching this because I really don't like this movie that much. And I had gone to brunch, and I might have had too much sangria, and I might have been in the middle of sobering up going through the worst hangover I've had as an adult as I watched this movie. So I did not give it the proper viewing. But I will say that
it's not a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 situation.
No, it is not. This is not
a loyal listeners.
I would say, as far as the execution goes, I would say with my knowledge and my studies as someone who's into films, I would say that this is the most I've appreciated the execution of the movie. I think on an execution level, I'd have to agree with you. I think it is executed flawlessly. I believe that the actual dramatic points in the content is very fast moving and very interesting. The camera is so dynamic. The camera's alive. The way that it flies up and is just dancing around and following really tight. Really reminded me of Spielberg when he's at his best, kind of stuff. And the music is just phenomenal. It's perfect, and everything's acted insanely well, And so this viewing really, I would be a liar and a bastard if I did not recognize the technical prowess upon which this movie stands. That being said, the content in this movie, every character is complete garbage shit, and I don't like any characters in this movie whatsoever. I hate the themes. I hate the perspective of how these characters act and how they behave and what their objection, like their motivations are. I want to save some of why the morality and the ethics of this film trouble me to my core, and why I think even as a kid I was upset by most of these themes. But let's focus on the things that we do like, and let's go into. Let's talk about the time travel method and how that's interesting. Chris, you're our Back to the Future fanboy, and you love this movie. What about the way that they convey time travel is really interesting to you?
So there's a reason that whenever a modern day time travel film references time travel, they talk about Back to the Future, bring up Back to the Future. Like even in Endgame, they drop Back to the Future by name. Granted, in Endgame, they're talking about how the time travel logic in Back to the Future is bullshit, but I mean it's a quintessential time travel movie, and the way in which they sneak all the necessary exposition into the film to make your understanding of how the time travel works simple and easily digestible is brilliant, and I think that's why when people think about vehicles for time travel, and I use the term like vehicle in kind of like a punny way, I guess. But like you think about the DeLorean first, you think about Doc Brown and Marty McFly first, and then there's Doctor Who following that. It's so well executed and it's so easy to understand, and I think that's why the time travel in this movie is so brilliant. 88 miles an hour, guys.
88 miles an hour. That's I totally agree with that, and just the functionality of it and how effective it is at allowing you to stay with the plot and not get caught up in functionally like what's actually happening here. I think that just the idea of speeding up to rip through time is something that they never explicitly talk about, but is visually it works so perfectly. And something that you didn't mention that I think is one of the best and most effective for understanding what's happening is the photo that Marty has, and how existences are based on this photo that he conveniently carries with him of his family, and how they're dropping away from existence as he's changing things in the past. It's so simple, but so effective. It's really brilliant, I think, how they do it. And just for its credit, Endgame, as if they really know how time travel works. Come on now, Endgame.
I don't know. Marcus and McFeely said that they talked to some physicists.
And are they traveling through time? They can stuff it.
They said that if time travel existed, this would be the most likely way in which it would affect the universe. Endgame, not.
No, I know. But in 10 years, there'll be a whole other different set of theories, I'm sure.
100%.
Yeah, I think it's iconic. That's the only word I can think about it. The DeLorean and it going back, and that adding to the drama and the tension and the action, and that being just a really cool time. I mean, I voted for the DeLorean as a cooler time travel vehicle.
You did.
I think it's badass. I think it's cool. I like the DeLorean. I like most things about it. I wish it was used a bit more, but I think it's used as economically as it needs to be. It's not him racing through different time periods and stuff. It's very set, and I think that's to this film's credit. It's smarter and more economical about it.
The way in which the DeLorean is used in every single Back to the Future film is it is a method for Marty to get to a time period, and then it is meant to break, and then the rest of the movie is him figuring out what he can use in that time period to fix the DeLorean to get back to the future,
right,
or back to the present.
Yeah, and if it was just always on, it would be a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, well, which they did turn Back to the Future into at one point.
Yeah, like quantum leaping. But I think, I think the best thing is it's illogical when you really think about the reality of time. Like the fact that he has a photo where people are slowly disappearing, as if the time is like the moment.
It would be instant.
Yeah, as soon as the car hit him instead of his dad, he'd be like. And again, you get into paradoxes, which is what Primer tries to deal with, which is, if he didn't exist, he wouldn't be back there to fuck it up in the first place. So it's a paradox of it wouldn't make any sense because he would never have been able to go back. But, on its face, it's very, again, economic with they set the stakes, and it's kind of that photo is a countdown.
I have to say, on that topic, one thing I noticed this time around, which is crazy that I've never noticed before, but like you said, Christian, using that photo as a countdown, the order in which his siblings disappear is oldest to youngest. So like Marty is our main character on purpose, because if his siblings are disappearing before him gradually, even though that doesn't make sense, like you talked about, it gives him like you said, a countdown clock to get what he needs to get done as his siblings disappear in the present or the future.
I think that works for me. I caught this this time too, Chris, that it was the oldest sibling that went first. And I think there's something about, as the movie presents it, he doesn't come back to the exact same reality, right? So things did change, and the characters are different in his new present. So I think it would make sense that they'd come back. It's like he was the first child they had, and if they got together, theoretically, they could still have him earlier in time. Maybe I'm just giving the movie too much credit, but
you are. But it's also a movie, and if it's about time, like these are the time travel elements and the plot holes. Every time travel movie, as we have found out, even Primer, the most dense, like seemingly well scientifically thought out movie, has a lot of what about this questions, Mm-hmm. So I don't think harping on that is anything that is going to get us forward into understanding whether this movie is quote unquote good or what impact it has on time travel movies. I think it is efficient. I think it is intelligent in how it portrays it, and the exposition is never have a Chris Nolan movie where it's like, all right, he's got time travel works, and it's like, and we got to listen to like 10 minutes on like with a montage, right? It's just kind of feeding you little by little, and Doc Brown's a great character for giving that exposition.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's move on. I don't think this movie is iconic without the score. And Chris, I'm surprised you composed our show notes. No pun intended. Composed our show notes, and you had made this a big point, and I want to hear your feelings on what the score means to you.
Well, now that Avengers Endgame is out and done, and we know that Alan Silvestri returned for Infinity War and Endgame. I was watching this movie and I was listening to the score and I was just like, you know what? Like Alan Silvestri, I would say is like in the top 5 most iconic and prolific and important composers for pop culture. Like I would, my list would be like John Williams, Alan Silvestri, Hans Zimmer, and Danny Elfman would be like some of the top tier composers for Hollywood history.
For like big Hollywood, yeah.
For big pop culture blockbuster films, yeah. That's basically the list. But the way the music helps build tension in this film, especially in the third act of the movie wouldn't feel the same without Alan Silvestri's score. It just wouldn't. Everything wouldn't feel as urgent without that iconic Back to the Future score. And yeah, they do rely heavily on that singular theme to build the tension, but I think it works so well.
I think that one thing that stood out to me so incredible is that there isn't a lot of action in this movie. You know, there's you've got the first scene with the Libyans. We'll get into that whole thing. You get the improvised skateboard poop truck with Biff, and you get the final clock tower. Those are really the big 3 set pieces. And the rest of the movie has to be propelled by this score and by, the dialogue and the camera work and everything. But really, this score is what is bringing this level of excitement and this level of mystery and science fiction. His use of the twinkly twinks, I don't know how else to describe it, but a lot of like high wind chimes and bells. That really leave these breadcrumbs for interest into what's going to happen with the story. I really think that it's doing a lot of the legwork in as far as pacing this movie out and making it feel exciting.
They basically play the twinkly twinks whenever the audience needs to pay attention to something, like something important just happened. So it's like, something's important in the timeline.
Yeah, exactly.
See, I wish I could pay attention on that level to the score. It's something that I really need to work on, listening to music in coinciding with action, but just how the theme is brought back over and over. And I feel like there are variations on it as well in building up to that final scene. The tension in the clock tower scene and the music with it is, I was on the edge of my seat. Like, it was ridiculous. And I mean, Doc Brown, he may be old, but that man can move. He can get down off that tower and plug some stuff in, pick up the tree.
Straight up zip line down an electrical wire.
He's like Batman, and it's incredible. But I can't speak to the the twinkly twinks as you guys so aptly put them. But this music it brought me back to my childhood, and when I think back on it, I can't think of themes in my head without watching the movie, which is probably part of why I can't talk about them well. But it resonated with me deeply, for sure, from childhood.
Dude, not only do I remember this theme from this film, but like I remember going to Universal Studios as a kid and walking through the huge archways at the entrance to the park and this theme song playing. So like this theme song has more connotations to me than just Back to the Future. It like represents so many other things as well, like big things from my childhood. Christian, sorry, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
No, I wish I broke down this a little bit more so I could have more thoughtful musical analyses for you guys. But I would say that, just from watching it yesterday, the main theme is so important and so interesting and actually unique among themes because I think it leaves a level of tension throughout most of the motif that it's kind of always escalating and never resolving for a very long time. And as far as like themes go, themes sometimes can just like quote unquote blow their load a little too soon and just kind of settle with you and try to make you
they blow their load and settle
Brian
with
hates
you.
when I use the phrase blow their load, but it's like the best way I can say to resolve tension. I mean, what's more tension than a load? So not letting things resolve, not letting you feel at ease for a very long time. And it's always kind of enticing you to go forward. I think back to Hans Zimmer's Superman score does this as well, where it's never really resolving the full chord. And you're always, to put it in kind of layman's terms, is like you're kind of waiting for a note to hit that never hits until a peak
waiting for the
pinnacle
bass to drop.
Yeah, kind of, but it's subconsciously
not in literal terms.
Subconsciously, if you like listen to a C chord, it's like dun dun dun, right? So if you're dun dun, you're like instinctually from just listening to music for your entire life, even if you don't even know what a C chord is or whatever, you're waiting for, and that's not a perfect C. I don't have a perfect pitch, by the way. If you're criticizing me, you're waiting for that last note to resonate, and it's a tricky battle between not resonating it and making it still interesting and having the audience engaged. And I feel like the main theme that Silvestri's doing here is really this great masterwork of balancing that tension out, and it's a really unique in that sense. If you listen, I was listening to the Jurassic Park theme, and that's a fantastic theme. But that theme is dun 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 dun, and it's kind of like always resolving the note that you're like. It's always kind of at ease. You're not feeling much tension until the like the coda or when it kind of like gets silent and crap. But that theme is like full and like you feel good throughout it. This theme is like you feel great, but really it's not actually resolving for a very long time. It holds its load very well.
It knows how to last, folks.
It knows how. This theme's got stamina. Don't think we're talking that. So, Chris, you had put in here. You talk about production challenges. I actually am unaware of. You had watched a documentary on the making of. If you want to plug that, and what did you learn from that and the production troubles?
Yeah, so I watched the documentary Back in Time. By Jason Aaron, and it's not only a documentary about like the making of the movie, but it's also a documentary about the fandom of the movie and like how people have taken their fandom of Back to the Future and turned it into something positive for their communities, which is a really nice message. But this movie faced a ton of production challenges in that initially when Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis wrote the movie, no studio wanted to take it. They didn't think it fit with what they wanted to do. In fact, a lot of studios were like, "Oh, take it to Disney. Like this seems like it's a Disney film." And then Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis actually ended up taking the script to Disney, and Disney was like, "You want us to make a movie about incest? Like, how could you even think that this studio would make this picture?" So it kind of had a tough time getting off its feet.
So,
and then, Brian, what were you going to say?
Just on that point, so I didn't watch the documentary. I was reading the wiki after going through the show notes, and I know a couple of the studios thought it wasn't raunchy enough because things like Porky's and stuff were getting popular at that point, and I was wondering if they had added some of the more questionable stuff to the script after that to try and sell it, but it sounds like that was already in the script.
The script was always as is, but like you said, the funny thing was a lot of the studios were saying, like you just said, it wasn't raunchy enough, and they were pushing it toward a company that was a little more family friendly.
Wow!
But the family friendly company wasn't family friendly enough, so it was really kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Nobody wanted to make it.
Wow.
And then Robert Zemeckis was also at this point in his career where he had partnered a lot with Steven Spielberg. They were really good friends. Spielberg had produced a lot of their stuff. So he didn't want to, for lack of a better phrase, he didn't want to jump into bed with Spielberg again because he wanted to prove that he could make a movie on his own. So what ended up happening is they ended up sitting on the script for a little while he went off and made Romancing the Stone by himself. That to prove that, hey, Robert Zemeckis is his own director. He can make his own movies. He doesn't have to rely on Steven Spielberg. And then after the fact, since no studio would pick up the script for them, they went back to Steven. Steven loved the script, and he helped them produce it and get it off the ground with Universal. So it had a tough time getting made. And then on top of that, like there were a ton of casting issues. Like Zemeckis wanted Michael J. Fox originally to be Marty McFly, but because of Fox's involvement with Family Ties at that time, the schedule just like wasn't working out for him to be in the movie, right? So they ended up starting production without him and casting Eric Stoltz as Marty McFly. But like a month into production, Zemeckis was like, man, like he's just not nailing the comedic beats. So they ended up firing Stoltz and working it out with Michael J. Fox to recast him in the role. It's just like a bunch of crazy stuff like that. Christopher Lloyd wasn't meant to be Doc Brown initially. It was meant to be John Lithgow. So
interesting. John Lithgow. Wow.
Yeah, this movie there's a universe out there where this movie is something totally different than like what we got, and so many things had to just align for this movie to be made. That's another reason why I think this is like such a miracle of filmmaking. Is like all these pieces came together in the perfect moment to release this like pop culture blockbuster juggernaut. Yeah. So
that's wild, and did well enough for 2 sequels, obviously. So
exactly.
Incredible.
And I think they actually shot the sequels back to back. But
okay.
You'll have to let me know how you feel about that after you watch the 2 of them.
All right. So, in speaking of how this movie got made, I think it is a miracle that it got made, because on paper, reading the script and understanding the characters and what this movie was trying to say. What did this movie try to say? This is where you guys have to defend this and tell me why this movie, why people related to this movie. Despite it's all the things that I've said are great about it. What? I don't even know where to start.
Let's bring in Freud and see what's going on here.
So, I don't even know where to start with this movie and its motivations for writing, and what kind of weird childhood Robert Zemeckis had that he felt the need to write this movie. This movie, to me, is like a fever dream of like some really deep-seated issues going on in a human being, like some real stuff you're trying to work out.
So the premise of the film, the way in which this screenplay came into being is, I believe Bob Gale was having a conversation with one of his friends about their parents in high school and if they would have been friends with their parents in high school.
Okay.
And they just kind of like started building on this premise of like, what would it be like to go to high school with your parents? And then that's where like the time travel aspect and kind of was the catalyst for the writing of this screenplay. So that's like the basic premise for this film. Like, what would it be like to go to high school with your parents? And then they just stack everything else on top of that, basically.
I guess where this movie really rubs me the wrong way is his dad is not a good person.
No, he's not.
Nope.
Okay. And so the fact that he's like forced to make his dad, who's a pervert, like doesn't have any redeeming qualities. And I'm not sure Marty McFly has that many redeeming qualities either. Follow with his mom, who also doesn't really have any redeeming qualities. And the tension of this movie is that he's forced, our main character has to find a way to make sure that his mom doesn't want to have sex with him and that his pervert dad ends up with his mom. I think that whole premise just is, I don't know how people watch this and are like, okay ethically with the situation that our character is forced into. What do you guys initially thoughts on that? What makes it redeeming for you to care about this plight?
Yeah, I think one of the messages that this movie is trying to convey, and granted, like, this movie's a blockbuster. There's a lot of comfort food, a lot of fluff in the storytelling of this film. But I think one of the things that this film is actually trying to say is that our parents aren't perfect people. Like, you get this idea of who your parents are as a child, and for the most part, a lot of people tend to believe their parents are like inhuman, right? Like these perfect people. But that's couldn't be farther from the truth. And I think that's illustrated really well in this movie, because at the very beginning of the film, you get this anecdote of like how Marty's parents met, how his grandfather ended up hitting his father with the car, and then his mother ended up nursing his father back to health, and then they ended up falling in love and were starting a family. But then once Marty actually gets to the past, he realizes that like his dad was a peeping Tom trying to look at his mom through a window. And his mom isn't the saint that she claims to be in the present. Like, she's always telling them like, oh, she doesn't believe that it's right for girls to call guys, or she's harping on Marty and Marty's sister for like drinking and stuff like that. But it turns out she was like just as bad, if not worse, when she was a teenager. So I definitely think that this is one of the the themes that this movie is trying to depict for the audience. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, that's the main positive takeaway, I'd say, as well, is just this breaking down of a teenager coming to terms with their parents as actual humans who are just as flawed, if not more flawed than they are. But at the end of the day, to Marty's credit, he is kind of blown away and disgusted by it as well, but at the same time wants to remain in existence. So he's kind of in a tough spot there where he's got to make this happen to continue living. So I don't think it's necessarily on him. And I don't know if there's that many examples of him really being a bad person. He kind of flies by the seat of his pants, but...
Yeah. He's very reactionary in this film. He's just, like you said, trying to make sure that his existence is saved. Like, there's only one instance in the movie in which Marty says that his mom is hot, and that's when the first time he encounters her, and he's shocked that that's his mother. From that point forward, Lorraine is the one that's trying to hook up with him without obviously knowing that he is her son. But he never reciprocates any of those feelings. He's always trying to avoid those feelings throughout the movie.
And she totally took his pants off and was checking out those 100%. Calvin Kleins. So...
I guess where it gets hard for me, besides Lorraine.
Okay.
Another Margot Robbie situation building here?
Not hardly. She comes on a little strong. Margot Robbie is the hard to get, which is definitely more attractive in my book. Anyway, let's get off my preferences with women. God, so much editing I got to do. So Marty, I guess the premise is what has always rubbed me the wrong way. So Marty McFly is portrayed as not flawed, and he's the cool guy who plays guitar and plays skate and rides a skateboard and wears a jean jacket, and his dad's this loser who tucks in his shirt and wears a tie and gets pushed over by his boss, and it's up to the cool son to like make his father not a horny nerd. Like it like makes me angry like that this idea and perception of a cool teen has to fix his pervy nerdy dad and his like horny mom. It's so weird to me and antithetical to like, I don't know, when I was in this old school like person I was raised up to, which is like, you know, you respect your parents and you respect your elders. They are flawed people, and I think it's interesting to observe the flaws that they have. But the whole movie has this, and probably why young people really love this movie in the 80s, it's just got this flair of like cool to it that feels very cheap and thin to me. And the idea that the cool son's got to fix everything with his skateboard and his guitar is like, I don't know, it just seems so oppressively simple and like stupid to me. That like his dad has, in the only way that his dad's going to be cool is if he wears like a sports coat and like drives a cool car and bosses around the bully and punches him in the face. It's like morally, it just seems kind of reprehensible to me that like the idea of good and righteous in this film is a cool jacket and a skateboard. It's like, I play guitar, I rode skateboard, right? And I wear cool jackets. Like I do those things. Like I try to be like a cool guy. I try to be like a sexy man, right? I get it. But those things are so thin to me, and Marty as a character to me in this film doesn't actually, I don't know, it's just like it seems very superficial to me, and maybe that's the popcornness. You're
not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong. Like it is Marty's character is very superficial and very shallow, and like even Bob Gale has admitted that he learns no lessons by the end of the film.
Like, and he already has the girl. Like, I don't know.
We've talked about when we covered Akira, we talked a little bit about like shonen characters, like teenage boys in shonen manga who are just kind of like fly by the seat of their pants and like muscle their way through any given situation. And I was watching this movie again, and like that's who Marty is. Like he's an archetype, you know. And we're only talking about the first movie here, but it takes 3 movies for Marty to learn anything. He doesn't learn anything until the very end of part 3 of Back to the Future. I wish they could have somehow put those messages in this first movie. But you're not wrong, Christian.
And I think this is something that in the 80s, like especially with things like comedies, action movies, I'm sure as well, but the culture has definitely changed in terms of On some level, not as much as it should, but in terms of how these things are represented on screen and what is cool. I mean, the 50s, I think it does a good job of showing how things were not particularly in a good situation back then. And maybe it holds the 80s up to a standard that it doesn't deserve. But I think it does do a good job there in showing how in that time period it was the big bully, like jock of the school who ran things, who was popular, who became successful. And Marty goes back and is able to help his pervert father become that guy instead.
Let's give his father some credit. He's also a budding science fiction novelist.
Right,
So,
that's
and a
also
pervert,
Marty. That's also Marty's doing, though, on some level, right? It's like he
Yeah.
presents himself as an alien, but which I thought was pretty hilarious. That Van Halen was the music that he chose. That was really awesome. But yeah, I feel like this is the type of movie that you can argue that it was made in the 80s. It may be the cultural values have changed since then to some degree, but I can't argue that it's not superficial. But to Marty's credit, how did Doc get involved with this 17-year-old kid? That relationship is very strange.
Yeah,
Like, how did they
that's
become
another
friends?
thing I want to talk about is that isn't hashed out of why they're hanging out. It doesn't seem like Marty is into science. Like he's not like a Peter Parker type where he's like into research. He's got like this cool dude who made me big giant amps.
Yeah, see,
The creators have also addressed this, and they don't disagree with you either. Like in the 80s, it was just like no one questioned it. It was just accepted that the 17-year-old was hanging out with this older scientist and they were having like weird misadventures together. Like people just accepted it. But I definitely think with the changing times, like that's why we're dissecting this
That's why we
movie
have things like Rick
so
and
much.
Morty, which, this movie is responsible for the Rick and Morty
Of course.
relationship.
Absolutely.
And so for that, I'm eternally grateful.
Yeah, Rick and Morty would not exist without this film at all.
Oh, no doubt. So I don't know if we'll get to it naturally, but something that I did want to shout out, which is a little bit, just watching it felt a little weird. So I always loved the scene where he plays guitar at the prom. And then this time, the whole idea that Chuck Berry was inspired by this white dude,
Yeah,
I was like, no,
terrible.
we're not really doing this.
It's awful. It's awful.
It was
is
very,
bad.
very bad. Like classic appropriation.
Oh, it's also him. It's the pinnacle of why I really don't like Marty McFly, which is that he just starts showing off and shredding. I mean, the only thing that's great about that scene is the ending where it's just like too much. Like people
It's like,
don't
you guys
like,
aren't ready for this yet.
Yeah, I think that is the saving grace of that scene, which is that he is not like, I really feel like I would have thrown something at my TV if he was shredded into all that and people were just like showering him with love and like that. I like the fact that he's kind of being an asshole at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
So the fact that movie acknowledges that is the only thing that saves me from just being like, I hate Marty McFly. He's a terrible person. And yeah. Like you said, I always, and even before I was quote unquote woke in a progressive age, it always bothered me that a black artist was like, oh my God, we need to take this sound. Like, I was like, that is fucking wrong. It is wrong on so many levels. That is cultural appropriation, literally done in time travel. It's terrible. It's terrible.
I 100% agree with you guys.
This movie has a lot of ethical problems in it.
It's still a perfect screenplay in my opinion. And it's like you said at the beginning, of our recording, Christian, like it comes down to like the technical execution of the way in which the story's told. Like regardless of the questionable ethics of the story, like from a technical perspective, the screenplay is tight and masterfully constructed.
Yeah, no, I have to succumb to all of that. As much as I want to berate you for liking this movie as much as you do, from an execution standpoint, again, I'm glad that we both concede on our points. Like, I feel like we're both in agreement. We're like, technically it's great, ethically it's murky at best.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's also what makes it an interesting conversation. I feel like I haven't dug too deep into all the critical conversations of Back to the Future in retrospective, but they probably boil down to something like this.
Question about the time travel here.
Mm-hmm.
So Doc had read the letter, we find out. Had all that happened, he taped it back together, which I was game for. I'm all in for that. But was this a closed loop situation where he knew Marty had to go back in time, or
No.
this was retroactively changed?
It's an alternate timeline.
Okay, so Doc was shot legitimately before Marty went back in time.
Yeah, there are multiple.
Okay.
I mean, besides like Marty waking up and his entire family life being much better,
Right.
like there are multiple things that have changed. Like if you notice, like at the beginning, it's the Twin Pines Mall, and Marty ends up running over one of the pine trees with the DeLorean when he gets back to 1950s. So when he gets back to the mall, it's the Lone Pine Mall.
No.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
and like so it's not a closed loop. They create an alternate future
Cool.
by going back and changing these things. Alternate but similar.
Okay, awesome. I will say another very memeable or gifable moment when Marty comes back to the mall after he comes back and he's trying to warn Doc. He falls flat on his face and rolls down this small hill, and it's just so ridiculous and hilarious. And I don't know why they kept it in, but maybe
I'm wondering if Michael J. Fox actually fell down the hill and they
it
just
seems like it could have been that, honestly.
So talking about all the movies that we've talked about this month, we have covered Primer. We've talked about 12 Monkeys. We talked about Endgame last month as our Marvel came to an end. Our Marvel month of madness came to an end, and now we're talking About Time, and now we're talking Back to the Future. Out of all these movies that we've talked about, and maybe we'll include anything else in the time travel realm.
I would encourage honorable mentions if you guys have any films that you would recommend for time travel enthusiasts in this list as well.
Would you say the best way time travel improves the story? Is that a fair thing? That's like this movie is better because of its time travel, and time travel is used to enhance the story the best?
I think that's fair.
Oh, cool. Okay.
What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, no, I'm game.
All right, who wants to go first?
Christian.
Oh, you put it on me. This honorable mention is going to be Terminator 2. I've always loved the fatalist idea because it simplifies time travel so much. Of like, hey, like it's all just one thing and it all just happens in a loop. And I love how both Terminator 1 and 2 use its time travel. So I would put that in. And James Cameron just can do no wrong. He makes excellent films. So that. But I would say as far as this, I want to say Primer because it was my choice, and I always feel like it's the nerdiest time travel movie. But even that movie, I feel like just falls apart in the third act as far as being concise. So I'd have to say my surprise hit, About Time. I think About Time uses it so dramatically effective and sets the rules to have such dramatic impact. And as far as how that movie conveys family relations and our relationships and talking about time as a thing and how we must move forward and using time travel as a theme for that, but it's not the crux of the whole movie. I just think that's a magical little medium that movie hits, where I really thought that was really charming. So I'd have to say, out of the ones we watched, I would say About Time, the time travel means the most to me as far as it reinforcing the themes of the picture. What about you guys?
As an honorable mention, and I don't know if people would disagree on this, I'm going to throw in Donnie Darko. This is a movie that I was probably recommended to me by you, honestly, Christian, in our movie stop going days. But yeah, I feel like that's one where, and the director's cut makes it a little maybe too cut and dry as to what's happening, but the original cut of it leaves you questioning what's actually happening. The story is compelling. It brings in those issues of mental illness that I really love about like 12 Monkeys and things like that. And yeah, it's just an overall great picture, in my opinion. You get both the Gyllenhaal siblings in there doing amazing acting performances. So that's got to be my... And the
time travel about it is the like plot twist. Like that's like the pinnacle of understanding the movies, where you go, oh shit, it's time travel. And so
spoiler alert, retroactively for Donnie Darko.
Yeah. You still won't, I guarantee you still won't understand it. Still won't make any damn sense.
So we're choosing a top functional time travel. Emotionally, I can't argue with the About Time. In terms of, it's hard to choose. I honestly missed the give top three here and haven't given too much thought about it until right now. I think in terms of modern physics, it's hard to argue against Endgame in terms of split universes, alternate realities, and how that would potentially play out. But I'm going to go Back to the Future. This movie is super effective, so understandable and fun at the same time. It doesn't require 5 other movies to build up to how this happens. It works very smoothly from the beginning, and yeah, I gotta say, coming back to it's got to be number 1 for me.
Awesome. I love that all 3 of us are going to give different honorable mentions, because I agree with both of your honorable mentions. Like, they're must watches for any time travel fan, or if you're looking to do a time travel binge like we did. But my honorable mention has to be 11/22/63, Stephen King's 11/22/63. Whether it's the novel or the Hulu miniseries, the way in which time travel works in the book. Are you guys familiar with the book or the miniseries?
Only vaguely.
So time travel, the way in which it works is the main character, Jake Epping, discovers a time portal in the back of like a diner owned by his friend. And his friend sends him on a mission to stop the assassination of JFK. But the way time travel works in the book is that once you go back, any changes you make will be erased if you end up going back multiple times. So, like, if Jake goes back in time through the door and says, like, prevents the murder of one of his friend's family, saves his friend in the present. When he comes back to the present, he can witness the changes, but if he has to go back in time for any reason, everything's reset and it goes back to the way it was. So the book does this really interesting thing of forcing its main character to make sacrifices in certain places. Like, he can't fix everything. And if his main goal is to prevent the assassination of JFK, he has to focus on that and maybe let other things fall by the wayside. So definitely a really interesting read. I also recommend the miniseries. James Franco does a great job as the main character. But yeah, that would be my honorable mention for time travel flicks.
And anything that he can't fix, you just call in the Time Beavers, and they'll get everything wrapped up.
They have a lot of experience with time travel, fighting those time traveling rats. I feel like any time travel needs, call in those Time Beavers.
I'm sorry.
We had to. So, Christian, your top time travel movie was About Time. Brian's, yours was Avengers Endgame. Right? No, yours was Back to the Future, but you said you appreciate Avengers Endgame. This is really tough for me because
just go Back to the Future. It's a perfect film. It's perfect, not a problem in it.
We aren't judging off the best film, right? Because I would change my... Okay, sorry.
Right. When we talked about Avengers Endgame, I said that I think it might beat Back to the Future for me. But going back and watching Back to the Future... like you said, Brian, Back to the Future doesn't have to rely on any supplementary material. It is a perfect standalone movie. Like, you can just sit down and watch it and get what's going on. And it's a fun ride, and it is a well-constructed story. So I think Back to the Future would have to be my number 1. But it's really difficult because, like you said, like Back to the Future, Endgame, and About Time give you such different things. And they all work so well in different ways, and they all illustrate a different mode of time travel. If I had to give my top 3, it would be Back to the Future, Endgame, and then About Time. Definitely.
Cool. I didn't get the 3 memo, so I just had the 1.
Just give it right now. Give your top 3 right now. Just do it.
So About Time, number 1. And then I'd say Endgame, and then Primer, just for the sheer audacity of it.
I dig it.
Cool. The listeners can now sleep soundly. Guys, any final thoughts on Back to the Future?
If you haven't seen this movie,
and morally sound. There's nothing wrong with it.
I'm going to separate myself from Chris on this one. I don't know if morally sound is the way I describe it.
I'm joking. This
what's
movie is so
what
far.
Do they have? What do the screenwriters have against the Libyans?
The question is, what kind of friends does Doc have where he's getting propositioned by the Libyans to make weapons for them?
And are
this
the
dude
Libyans
is into some
known
sketchy
for
shit.
Were the Libyans known for having plutonium, like high levels of illegal Like, I don't understand the historical correlation either.
Yeah.
It's not like if it was the Russians, I can get that at that time,
This was the one part as a kid where it totally I totally glossed over it. Like, it just went completely over my head. And then coming back to it over and over again as an adult, I still don't quite understand the relationship or how that encounter even came to be. So I completely agree with you guys. It's a very weird part of the film.
Yeah, there must have been something in the late 70s, early 80s that was culturally relevant that people would have understood, I imagine. But at the end of the story, they just blow up anyway. So it's kind of just like, oh, they were just there to get the plutonium.
Yeah, they are generic ass Middle Eastern people. Like, it is terrible. It's terrible.
It's not okay.
Yeah, one of the more ethically problematic.
Wait a second.
Back to the Future.
I think
This film is morally
Libya is in
sound.
Africa.
It's in Africa. Well, Middle Eastern Africa. The part of the Middle East is in Africa. It's like the top of Africa.
They got the wraparound.
Listeners, geograph. Actually, Chris, you're in cartography. You should know this. You should know the answer to this. Chris, last thing I will ask. You're way more familiar with the Back to the Future trilogy. Where do you put the second one in comparison to the first one? You know, is my mark that I enjoy the second one? Is that a rare thing, or is the second one panned pretty hard? I like the sports almanac thing. I think Biff is good as a villain.
So let me say this. Like, growing up, I like the second one as well. But I was sick one day this week, and I ended up binging all three of these in one day, which that tends to happen every single time I sit down to watch Back to the Future, because each movie ends in a cliffhanger.
Right.
So, like, I just keep going. The second one, it's kind of like a Back to the Future greatest hits, to be perfectly honest.
Right. Okay.
Like, they're kind of just trying to recapture the magic of the first one. So I think the first one is much better. The way in which I would rate the franchise is 1, 3, and 2.
Ooh, really? I thought 3 was like the most despicably hated one.
It is, like, among the fandom, but I think 3, like I said, Marty doesn't learn any lessons until 3.
Interesting.
So, like, you actually have character growth in 3, which 2 just does not have. Like, 2 really is, like, kind of a carbon. It's a roundabout way to carbon copy Back to the Future 1.
Interesting.
But that's just my.
So after you watch, I signed up for a free subscription to Cinemax through Hulu. Which, if you want to watch all 3 of these movies for free, sign up for that free trial. It's like a 7-day trial. You can binge them and then cancel. So awesome. I might revisit it just to have some opinions. But I'm also trying to see John Wick, and I also have to see that new Godzilla movie. So I got lots of stuff to do with not a lot of time.
I still haven't rewatched them, but after having talked to people and listened to people talk about John Wick 2, I may change my order from 1, 2, 3 to putting 2 at the front. I got to come back to these movies. I'm going to update it. Yeah,
no, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen 2. I've only seen it once. I did just watch it once, where I've seen the first one a couple times and still have yet to see the third. So let's watch those as well. Very cool. Guys, if you have suggestions about what we can watch, how we can theme our months, what you guys want to hear from us, email us at popaholicscast@gmail.com. But if that's it for you guys, I'm going to plug my music, Midnight Satire. You can go to midnightsatire.bandcamp.com, or on your favorite streaming service, just search for Midnight Satire Bad Karaoke, the album, and there may be some new stuff coming out. There may be a cover in the future that I'll plug next week. Ooh, maybe some self-produced stuff going on. So excited for that. Guys,
I have one question before we leave, Christian.
Yeah.
What are we doing next month?
Oh, shoot. We are talking about all things Godzilla.
Oh, no.
Gojira.
We are talking... Chris, I'm so glad you asked what we're doing next month. We are talking about all things Godzilla. And by Godzilla, I mean we're going to talk about 3 American versions of Godzilla and then 1 Japanese one, which we're not sure of. You know, the people that, I don't know, invented it. And that's going to be theme in our month. We're going to talk about the my favorite Matthew Broderick Godzilla, which I think is more ethically sound than Back to the Future.
We'll see about that.
See.
Well, actually,
I remember there being a subplot where Godzilla goes back in time to sleep with his mother, so her mother. But it's been a while since I've seen the movie, so I don't know.
I think that's ethically progressive.
Just two lizards finding love in time.
We're going to talk about the new King of Monsters, which I'm super excited about. I think I've said about that movie, I don't think that the movie could possibly be better than the two trailers that have come out. The two trailers are the best trailers I've ever seen for anything. So we'll see how it lives up to that. But we'll also be talking about the 2014 Godzilla and a yet to be determined Japanese version of Godzilla.
And we all definitely knew that this was the sequel to the 2014 one.
100%. All three of us
We all
knew.
totally knew. Definitely.
Yeah. Not a one of us didn't realize it.
Yeah. Nobody here. That's for sure. Cool, guys. You guys have a great week.
Have a great week.
Consume consciously, everyone.
Pop-O-Holics.